being from Eastern Europe and going through like childhood stuff, it's hard for me to open up to begin with. So it's like it was like pulling teeth for me to kind of even share. So I think she wanted me to have more emotion and share, but I was kind of like numb.
This is gonna hurt. It's time for the Suffering Podcast.
Absolutely.
What did Stacey Ellis call it? Generational curses?
Yeah, I see it a lot, and we haven't talked about it yet. But as a foster parent, the children's parents were in foster care, so on and so forth, and the same kind of issues travel throughout.
I say that about like welfare too. A lot of these kids are brought up on welfare, and they look up and they say, "Well, mommy and daddy don't have to work. And they get money."
Yeah, we were on welfare for 3 months, and he took us off welfare, 6 people. So my grandparents were 55, both retired here. My grandmother had to clean houses. My grandfather did roofing for 20 years here, from 55 to 75,
Wow.
where dudes were coming here like 20, 25 years old to make money on a work visa from Ukraine. And they're like, I'm not doing this for more than like 2 weeks. I got to find something else. It would be in like 100-degree heat.
Oh, if you ever did roofing is one of the most brutal jobs ever.
And 55 to 75, he did that without complaining, Monday to Saturday. And then he would go to church Sunday morning and Sunday night, and then the same kind of routine over
You want to talk about the world's deadliest job? Try doing roofing as an Irish person.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, those guys in Alaska have nothing on me. And I've done it. Listen, I did it for a short time, but everything gets beat up on you.
Yeah.
But that's the mentality of especially first-generation immigrants. First-generation immigrants, they know what it's like back in their country.
And they don't want to go back, so they want to prove themselves here.
And they'll work hard. And now, were they the type of immigrants to keep every nickel?
I mean, to a certain extent. I mean, we weren't like frugal, but yeah, I mean, I guess they saved. I mean, my grandparents really didn't have a lot of expenses other than rent, so they didn't really take that many vacations other than when we started kind of like, being more stable, taking them places. But other than that, they went back a few times to take care of elderly family members in Ukraine that got sick or developed like dementia, that kind of stuff. So they were in Ukraine, and then they went back for like a year or two to care of whoever, and then, kind of came back as well.
Now, when you finally become of adult age, you have this vision of what a grown-up is supposed to be, like all children have. Listen, I remember when I was younger, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to grow a mustache because that was the big thing. Like, I'm going to grow a mustache. And, when you become older, it's like shaving was cool when you were younger, but shaving's not so cool now. What was your visions of what an adult is supposed to be?
I guess a provider. And I mean, at that point,
was it father, son, his kids in picture?
Yeah, like it was telling myself I would be different than my father. So like at a young age, I would like reinforce that. I guess I don't know if I would call it a positive affirmation, but I didn't want people or kids, regardless of the kids in my life, either me being an uncle or kids of, friends, anyone else, my own children, to kind of be brought up in that situation, knowing how it impacted me when I was young.
So you learned that lesson, and then you meet your lovely wife. All right, with your first wife out of the gate, was it the love of your life? Tell me you were starstruck in the beginning.
Yeah, so it was. Yeah, I've been this is my only marriage.
This is disgusting. You call yourself an American? You got to get at least divorced once.
Well, I mean, I can go to maybe Dubai and have 4, but
yeah, sure. Well, listen, it's good for the men in here. Listen, not so good for women.
Stick with one. You can't afford 4 wives. Believe me.
Frank Barone from Everybody Loves Raymond. When you have a problem with a woman, you don't go out and get another problem.
Yeah.
But that's good though. I mean, it's a nice thing to find somebody who you can connect with. What was it like when you met your wife?
I mean, we dated for like a year and a half before we got married. So it's fairly kind of, I guess, quick. At one point before then, I mean, I went to college. I interned with the Secret Service. At one point, I was training to be a Marine Corps officer. So go from college to officer candidate school. That's kind of like the path in terms of the Marines. So if you're in a university, you get a bachelor's degree, you can go to officer candidate school. And then if you finish that, you get a commission as a second lieutenant officer. But I got sick. I didn't know I had a bacteria called H. pylori in my stomach. I had that for years. So like doing the pre-ship PFT, which is the physical exam, I couldn't do the 3 miles. I would stop halfway and start spitting out blood. So in retrospect, if I went to Quantico, I probably would have died. So, it's like,
Blessing in disguise, really.
thinking back, and that's a way I kind of discovered it in a way. And, after college, I, stumbled in terms of my career, what I do now. And then I met my wife. We were engaged, and then she actually took a job. She was in Atlanta for 10 months. So I was kind of back and forth visiting her, and then she came back up here. And then to save money, we just did a court ceremony. And then our 5-year anniversary, we had a vow renewal, which was kind of our ceremony.
You were one of those few people. How many people got married and said, "Oh yeah, we're going to do the court ceremony, but we'll have a party later. We'll have then the party never, because life gets in the way. Party never happens." But that's good. That's really good that you end up doing that.
Yeah, we did it. We kind of wanted to save money to begin with, so we actually, bought a house instead of having a
Pay for
ceremony.
an extravagant wedding.
Well, I mean, there's situations,
Your
people,
immigrant status is starting to come out. That's the immigrant buy a house. Like they're good at that. Like immigrants are good at that stuff. They really are. They're good at like planning themselves.
Well, it's accountability too. I mean, the U.S. is, I don't even know how we're going to get out of the debt we're in as a country. I think every country is in debt, but I mean, being responsible for yourself, fiscal responsibility, financial responsibility, it's kind of like one of those things. And I never want to owe anything to anyone. I'm one of those kind of people. Even back in the day in like high school and middle school, I borrowed $5 for lunch. I got to find the person the next day because it's like a burden on me. I can't
That's why I don't own a credit card. I don't even own one. I don't want one. I don't want to borrow money from anybody. I don't want to owe anybody anything.
That eats away at me. Now, I know people on the opposite spectrum who people have loaned me money when I was in really bad times financially. And I was afraid to buy any luxury until that was all paid back. And that's the way that I am. But I know people on the opposite side of that they'll go out. I gave a guy needed $500 to keep a storage unit. Next thing I know, on Facebook, he's buying a motorcycle. What the fuck, man? I'm just like a chump. Like that's how I felt, and I don't understand that.
You want to hear a funny story? Someone that we both know, Nicky Burke.
Oh yeah,
guy I graduated police academy with.
Oh yeah.
Wound up getting married, and his apartment caught on fire. He lost like everything. So I reached out to all the academy classmates and said, "Why don't we all pitch in money? We'll go down, give it to Nicky." I got in touch with his supervisors and all that. We go down, we present him with a wad of money. He goes, "Come on, let's go out drinking." He took us all out drinking that night.
No, but that says
that's Nicky Burke. That's Hoboken for you.
Now, when you were together with your wife, you always wanted to be a father. You saw the holes in your parents' relationship, and you could do better.
Yeah, I mean, plus it's legacy. I think that's one of those things. I think life is meant to reproduce, as simple as you want to think about it, and that's kind of like the way you stay on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
So you have obviously children. You kind of raise them the way you want to raise them, instill the values you want to instill. So technically they're a mirror of you. So you have little clones in the world. So when you pass away, they're carrying that kind of knowledge, the stories you've told them, the way you've raised them, and then keep going. So a lot of people are like, I don't want kids, but it's like, okay, what is the point of, I guess, life if not to, I guess procreate and reproduce in a way? Like that's the
keep the Prokopchuk name going.
Yes, you have to keep that lineage going.
Yeah, and it's one of those things. I had an interesting interview. It's about like our primordial self and all the human systems. So taking all the systems out, like all the financial and the government structures. If you go to like the animal kingdom, they only kill what they need. They don't overfish, overhunt, so on and so forth, and they continue to carry their lineage on. So it's kind of like diving down to that kind of level, I guess.
There is one caveat to that. There is one caveat that, because I'm a history guy.
Okay.
So, Americans slaughtered the American buffalo.
Yeah.
We just slaughtered them. We didn't come up with that idea. Do you know who came up with that idea?
No.
The American Indians. Here's how they used to hunt buffalo, because there were so many of them. They used to pick an area, and they used to have one young brave dress up in a buffalo skin and start a stampede towards a cliff.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then all the buffalo would go over the cliff, and they would just go down there, and it was just easy hunting for them. There wasn't enough Indians, American Indians, to hunt as many buffalo. But we didn't help at all. The Europeans didn't help at all. So you want to have kids, you want to continue that legacy. Your wife gets pregnant. tell me about the joy inside. You're about to carry on the name.
Well, the thing we were naturally trying, and it, you know, it
Well, you're
she wasn't
married. I
getting
hope you're
pregnant.
trying.
Yeah, she wasn't getting obviously pregnant, so we went to a infertility specialist. So she has found out she has endometriosis, which makes it tougher to get pregnant, and basically went that route. So in like 3 or 4 years, spending probably in excess of $100,000 out of pocket on different treatments. A lot of stuff isn't covered by insurance. So like egg retrieval. So at one point, like they pumped her up in terms of hormones. So they did an egg retrieval. So they retrieved like 30 eggs she produced. So she was like in so much pain. And then basically, created embryos out of that, graded the embryos and knew which ones boys, girls. And then we did basically IVF, which is kind of the transfer of them, IUI and IVFs.
That's how you have like octuplets, though. You got to be careful.
Yeah, well, I mean, if they put
vitro.
put two, often if you have one, it'll split. But a lot of the time, when they say, "Hey, put multiple," because sometimes you'll have one survive and one maybe not make it to term or just not be feasible at all. But like if you have that lady Octomom or whatever, they put a lot of embryos in her. And then
Nadia Solomon.
Octomom.
They split. They keep splitting. They have a kind of like a keen sense of doing that.
That was the amazing mitosis of her eggs. But what kind of pride did that? When you finally insert the egg, you're ready to go. I'm going to be a dad. That had to be a joyful experience for you.
Yeah, you see, like you're there, you see it happening, and you kind of monitor it.
I think I was there during the
Getting us-
conception of my kids. I'm not sure though. I'm really not sure, 100%.
I'm going to stay away from that.
But
Would you see the sonograms and all that stuff?
Yeah, and you go like every few days and monitor like all the levels and whatnot because it's more high risk, and even before that, you kind of have to trick the body that you're pregnant. So for like 2 or 3 weeks prior, I had to give my wife these shots with like nasty gauge needles in her lower back to progesterone and all kinds of other stuff that at this point, like her body's like messed up, like the nerve endings and everything. I mean, I hate needles, so that's one thing for myself, but like she had the brunt of that. It's basically like getting your body hormonally to a point where you kind of trick yourself like your body's pregnant, because anything you kind of put in your body in a way, it tries to like safeguard it, reject it or whatever.
Your body's going to reject it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But then eventually disaster strikes. All right.
Yep.
So how far along did the baby get carried to?
We experienced in about 3.5 years 6 miscarriages. So all of them were in the first trimester. The longest one was towards the end of the first.
So the first one in particular, when your wife loses the baby, we all know the pains that the women go through, and we're not discounting anything with the way the women feel. But very few people, this is a conversation that is never had. What was it like for you?
Kind of, you don't know how to act. You don't want to like upset your partner in a way because
You want to try to stay strong.
yeah,
And
twofold. It's like she's dealing with it emotionally and the whole body aspect of it. So like her body is rejecting it. You have all the hormonal components, all kind of like the scarring and the tissue damage and like lower back from all the needles and stuff. So it's kind of figuring out how to, I guess in a way, grieving, but kind of stepping on eggshells because you don't want to like say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And back then, like looking for any kind of resource of somebody else dealing with it, like a lot of men don't talk about it. So that's one reason I decided to kind of start sharing that, because I didn't find a resource or anything, to relate to it. So I feel like if you're experiencing something out there and there's no one to be the voice, kind of.
I'm sure there's a lot of
voice
resources for women that go through it, right?
Yeah.
But nothing for men.
Isn't that the way of the world? It's a neglected section of that whole process, and that like there needs to be more men talking about how you feel, because we're going to keep it inside. We're going to try to remain strong for our wife, but inside, I imagine you're a mess.
Well, yeah, and like I said, coupled with other things like childhood trauma and just like not being trusting throughout life based on like business relationships or like giving people the benefit of the doubt and having things like that kind of bubble up. So, yeah, I mean, we talked to, therapists about it, how we kind of feel about it, how we're coping with it. I mean, it's one of those things that, people experience a miscarriage a lot of the time. That's a big factor in terms of why couples split
Yeah,
up
exactly.
because they can't
I was
deal,
gonna say
they
that.
can't handle it as well. So
Right, you blame it on the woman and you leave. No. That's the wrong way to do it.
I was going to ask that. Did it cause any tension in the marriage, or?
yeah, I mean, like communication. I mean, I think like being from Eastern Europe and going through like childhood stuff, it's hard for me to open up to begin with. So it's like it was like pulling teeth for me to kind of even share. So I think she wanted me to have more emotion and share, but I was kind of like numb, just emotionally numb, and had to kind of get through it. I don't think I got to a point where it was satisfactory, like what she wanted as a reaction. But I did the best I could, I guess.
But that almost gives off like an air of you really don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I mean, you're trying to be the nice guy and do the nice thing and not say the wrong thing.
But like
But in effect, it looks like you don't care.
like he said, there is no roadmap to this. You couldn't find any resources about it. After your wife lost that first child, what is the first? Can you remember what the first thing you said to her was?
Probably I'm sorry, or just I don't think I said anything for a little bit. I think we kind of just sat there, and absorbed it in a way. Like I didn't even know how to react. Like I mean, how do you really, as a human, react to this?
If you're a human being, if you're a human being, you have emotions. But like I said, you're walking that fine line. You're trying to be conscious of the pain she's in and the hormones that are going on in her body and the rejection of this. But you're also trying to be her husband, her protector, fill that traditional role.
Yeah. Plus, it's like a trauma. Like when trauma happens, if it's a loss, like of a loved one or whatever, it's like you're kind of in shock. I guess you're going through like everybody goes through a grieving process differently, and the grieving process, may last longer, may be shorter. But like for me, I think I was more in like shock, so like numb, and that had to kind of wear off. I think it was similar. My grandparents passed away. They were like, the closest people in my life. My grandfather more sudden, my grandmother this past summer. And it was one of those things where it's like shock at first. And then it's like shutting down. And then it's like thinking back, it's not fair to the people around me or like the people that brought me to the United States for me to just like abandon and like put a pause on like all my goals and aspirations and just, communication with people.
How much courage did it take for both you and your wife to get back up on the horse and try again? Because I know
I mean, that had to be a discussion in itself.
the pain of the loss alone, it's a fear that very few people can ever fathom.
Yeah. I mean, and well, obviously we did it because we did it, 6 times and we had six miscarriages. Like at this point, I think, we talked about it and I think she's going that, infertility route. I think we're done. If like God willing, we get naturally pregnant, then, thank God. But other than that, putting her body and everything else through that process, I don't think so. And it was just one of those things where I didn't necessarily push it. I think when she was ready for the conversation, I was, on board for it. And like I mentioned off air, 2 of those miscarriages happened on Christmas days. So Christmas now has like, behind your, mind a
A
negative
different
connotation.
connotation to it.
Yeah. So
How did you specifically mourn the child that was lost? Whether you believe a child is at conception or when it's trimester, doesn't matter. You mourn for the loss of something that's a piece of you that's no longer here. How did you mourn? You and your wife mourn for that.
I mean, I took some time to myself. I tried to pray, kind of like meditate about it. She actually got a tattoo of like doves, like little doves in the middle of the dove is like a little heart. So that's kind of her kind of like, I guess, remembrance
Yeah,
of it. And,
absolutely.
And having that with her. But I mean, I just try to be there as much. I try to put her and her kind of well-being before myself, even though it may have not seemed like it to her, because I think a lot of stuff in the U.S. or in general that men do aren't necessarily like, being providers or protectors or anything like that. Just one of those things where like you have to step up. I don't think it's viewed like, you made the sacrifice, so on and so forth, because it's something like it's kind of ingrained in a way. So just kind of like stepping up and being strong in a way. But I mean, I don't know if she would agree with me. I think maybe she would just say that I was more like reserved and closed in emotionally. But like you said, I think emotional vulnerability for me is not a weakness, but I'm guarded about it, because I mean, I've had that, I guess, kind of like used against me in a way, or being emotionally vulnerable in situations or opening up where people use that against me, either in business where it's trying to like go down to like a human level, or just other relationships as well.
I have noticed that when people have dual trauma, when they go through trauma together, and you can go on down the line, people who serve in the military, in boot camp, they're going through all that hardship, they have a bond. You and your wife have gone through dual trauma together. Did it bond you closer in any way?
I mean, I think so. I mean, like the other things we've experienced, a lot of like losses of family members, fostering 29 kids, now just recently adopting our son. I think it did, because we have that connection and most people don't. And I think,
It's kind of like if we can get through this,
We can get through anything.
the rest of the stuff's background noise.
yeah, it's most people uh, break in situations like that. So like high pressure, high trauma. I mean, different things, different careers, stuff like that. It plays a toll. So each of those, I don't think hurt less, but it was just one of those things where you weren't as positive each time. It was kind of like, there's a high probability of this happening again. Do we really want to put ourselves through it? And going through it together, I some things like that, I don't think I can handle alone. Obviously, the miscarriage is different, but going through like having a child be reunified in a bad situation as a foster parent. Like if I was a single dad as a foster parent, it's just like I call it like emotional masochism, because you're gonna go through it and you put yourself through that pain anyway.
Emotional
I
masochism.
like that.
I like that one a lot. You
Self masochism.
Self-masochism.
You're putting yourself out there. You know it's going to happen. You know the pain's going to happen, but you do it anyway, hoping the net positive result happens.
Resisting success.
That's it. That's it.
It's the same theory.
How did you get into fostering children?